Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are tackling one of history's most fiercely debated concepts, feudalism. Now, it's a word we all feel like we know, right? But as we're about to discover, its meaning, its origins, well, that's a real battleground for historians. And let's just start with this bombshell from historian Elizabeth A.R. Brown. Back in 1974, she called feudalism a tyranny of a construct. She basically argued the word itself is a trap for historians, something that might actually hide the truth more than it reveals it. And honestly, that central tension is what we're going to explore today.
So, right off the bat, here's the most important thing to get your head around. Nobody in the Middle Ages woke up and said, "Man, it's a great day to live in this feudal system." They never used the word. It was invented hundreds of years later. So we're not just talking about a historical period, we're talking about the idea that historians created to try and make sense of it all. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to look at the debates over its origins, dig into what it actually was. Was it about law or the whole society? Then check out the economic angle, the idea of a sudden feudal revolution. And finally, we'll ask if the whole concept is even useful.
All right, let's dive in. First question, where did this thing even come from? And believe me, the answers historians have come up with are all over the map. So the classic old-school theory is that it was a synthesis, basically a merger. You take the structural bits and pieces of the late Roman Empire, things like tying peasants to the land, and you fuse that with the really intense personal loyalty of those Germanic warrior bands, the comitatus. For a long time, this was the standard explanation. It's like one side provided the skeleton, and the other provided the psychological glue that held it all together. But what if that whole gradual blending idea is just wrong? A completely different school of thought came along and said, hold on, the trigger wasn't some slow cultural fusion, it was a series of sudden technological shocks that completely rewired society. And this is where LYNN White Jr.'s argument comes in, and it is fascinating. He lays out this perfect chain reaction. It all starts with one piece of tech, the stirrup. Suddenly, a guy on a horse can hit someone with a lance at full speed and not get knocked off. Boom. Mounted shock combat makes heavy cavalry the new superweapon on the battlefield. But, and this is a big but, it is insanely expensive. So how do you pay for these new knights? You pay them with the only thing you've got loads of, land. And there you have it. The fief is born out of military necessity. But then, what if the real cause wasn't about fighting at all, but about money? Or the lack of it? The Belgian historian Henri Pirenne came in and just blew up both of the old models with this radical idea. He said, stop looking at the battlefields in France. You need to be looking at the Mediterranean Sea. Pirenne's argument was this. The Islamic expansion in the 7th and 8th centuries essentially put a cork in the Mediterranean, shutting down the trade that was the lifeblood of the old Roman world. And without that trade, cities shrink, cash basically vanishes, and Europe's economy has to retreat back to the land. Land becomes the only game in town, the only real source of wealth. So if you're a king and you can't pay your soldiers in coin, you pay them in land. For Pirenne, it was simple. No trade, no cash, no choice, but feudalism. Okay, so we've got these competing theories on where it came from. But that leads to an even bigger question. What was it, really? Was it just a set of legal contracts for the rich and powerful? Or was it something much bigger, like the very air that everyone in medieval society breathed? And this table just lays out that conflict perfectly. On one side, you have F.L. Ganshof. He saw it in very narrow legalistic terms. For him, feudalism was only about the specific contracts between lords and their vassals, the free warrior class. He thought the peasants and the whole farming economy, that was something separate he called manorialism. But then, on the other side, you have the legendary French historian Marc Bloch. And he said, no, you can't separate these things. For Bloch, feudalism was a total social formation, a vast web of personal dependence that tied everybody together, from the king at the very top to the poorest serf at the bottom. For Bloch, the key to the whole thing was what he called the human nexus. You have to imagine, this was an age where central authority had crumbled. It was dangerous. So society basically rewired itself around these personal bonds. You tie yourself to someone more powerful for protection, for land, for your very survival. And they're tied to someone more powerful than them. This web of dependence. For Bloch, that was feudal society. And another brilliant thing Bloch did was to show that feudalism wasn't static. It changed over time. He talked about two feudal ages. The first was this raw, brutal period of just trying to survive, forged in the chaos of invasions. But the second age saw this huge economic revival. Trade comes back. Towns start to grow. Society gets way more complex, but it's all still built on that same fundamental bedrock of personal dependence. Now, that economic side of things brings us to a whole other way of looking at this. These interpretations shift the focus away from loyalty and bonds and zero in on exploitation and power. They took Bloch's idea of a total society and asked a new question. Forget the bonds for a second. Who's getting rich and how? So Marxist historians see feudalism as a mode of production. And what they mean by that is, forget all the fancy ceremonies with lords and vassals for a minute. For them, you can boil the entire system down to one core relationship: a class of landowning lords using force, legal force, military force, to squeeze surplus labor and food out of a class of unfree peasants, the serfs. That's it. That's the engine of the whole system. And this framework led to one of the all-time great historical debates, the Dobbs-Sweezy debate. So why did feudalism end? Did it collapse from the inside, as Maurice Dobb argued, because the lords got so greedy they basically squeezed the system to death? Or, as Paul Sweezy claimed, was it killed off by an outside force, the rise of towns and trade which gave peasants a new option to just get up and leave? And this wasn't just some dusty academic argument, it was a debate about what fundamentally drives historical change itself. Perry Anderson came along and offered this incredible synthesis. He said the key political feature was the parcelization of sovereignty. It's a great phrase. It basically means that public power, the state's right to tax, to hold trials, to raise an army, it just shattered. It got privatized. A lord wasn't just a rich guy who owned land. He was a kind of mini-king on his own turf, with powers that used to belong only to the state. But hold on, what if feudalism didn't slowly evolve at all? What if it just exploded into existence around the year 1000 in a sudden, violent rupture? That was the seismic idea that came out of France and completely shook up the debate. So historians like Georges Duby and Thomas Bisson argued that right around the year 1000, public authority just fell apart. Local warlords, these castellans, took over. They seized the public right to command and punish the banim for themselves. And this led to a new and brutal wave of violence. They imposed what's called the seigneurie banale, basically just making up taxes and using pure force to turn free peasants into serfs. Then, to legitimize this whole violent takeover, the church steps in and creates the ideology of the three orders: those who pray, those who fight, and those who work. It made this new power structure look like it was God's will. Now, of course, this revolution idea is itself massively debated. Critics like Dominique Barthélemy came back and said, hang on, is this really a revolution in society, or is it just a revolution in record-keeping? Maybe the violent reality had been there for a while, and it's just that around the year 1000, people started writing it down more. It's a fascinating question. And all of this brings us right back to where we started, right back to Elizabeth Brown's powerful question: is this word, feudalism, actually a useful tool for understanding the past? Or is it just a construct, a box that we try to force a messy history into? Well, the most radical critics, like Brown and later Susan Reynolds, basically say we should just throw the word out. Reynolds, in her amazing work, argued that the neat, tidy feudal system we think of was pretty much invented by lawyers in the 12th century who were trying to organize and make sense of older, much messier customs. And then modern historians came along, took that neat legal model, and mistakenly projected it backward onto a past where it never really existed as a system. So, after all that, where do we land? Well, it seems pretty clear that the idea of a single, unified feudal system is probably a fiction. But, and this is the important part,